right, welcome back to Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats Comic Book Symposium for another week. It is May here, and we are talking with the amazing panel as always, and the great hosts, Ray Caracas. Wait, damn it, I never say that right. What is it again?
Carcases. Nobody does.
Ray Carcases.
So bad.
As long as I don't say carcasses, because that's definitely
Right.
Well, actually, that's closer to the Cuban way of saying it, but keep it carcases.
all right, carcases. Craig CK and Rick Lopez, want to welcome all you to the group. We've got two amazing guests coming up very soon, and this week we're talking a little bit about taking our comics, taking our creations a little bit beyond the comic book page, taking them from the beautiful pages that we see into different mediums, into different creations, into different just different mediums. And if you would be interested in doing that with a creation you made, or would you rather keep it in its pure comic book form? But first, as always, we're going to start as we always do. Actually, first, what I'm going to do is mute everyone except for the hosts. So that's happening right now. And so then I'll ask to mute all the hosts, unmute all the hosts. And then we're going to do our plugs, which we do every month. So as you know, I'm Eli Schwab from Cosmic Lion Productions, I think is what it's called. And we recently put out Image Grand Design and Image Grand Disaster. Starting on May 20th, Image Grand Disaster, the digital comic, is going to be available on imagegrandddesign.com. And right now, all the internet sales, all the e-sales are going directly to the Hero Initiative after we do another month of sales. Right now, we're at $1,500 raised just for digital comics. So I think by the time it's all done and said and done, we can get up to $5,000 raised for this. I recently made a deal with Collectors Paradise, Connect Collectors Paradise, all in California. They're going to be carrying some more copies of Image Grand Design. So if you're listening out there in the audience, hopefully soon you might be able to grab the last few copies of Wizard and Image Grand Design at collectorsparadise.com. All right, Ray, what you got going on, man?
I've been just stepping up a lot of the YouTube review videos for books, just focusing on small press, independent stuff, or things that I've liked. Just like everybody else, trying to give a decent take and what I like about it. So, it's fun. It's also making me read the books differently.
That's cool. Now, are you going to be releasing those on YouTube, or I know you did one through iCloud?
I decided to upload it onto YouTube, so I just put the YouTube link in the Facebook group. I just for small collectors, it's if anybody says, well, what book do you have? It's oh, I got a review up. It may not amount to anything, but it's something you can point somebody to.
Absolutely.
So it's just more for fun, and it's more for that reason.
Awesome. Cool, Ray. We'll look for that. I'm going to have the link to that down in the comments, or if you want to put it in chat there for everyone. Okay. Craig CK, what's going on, man?
Same old. Still rocking Next Panel Press with Rick and Burgess Meredith, who I don't think could make it. And now, of course, you. And full bore on my my Rob Liefeld project. Just head down, doing my fucking thing, bro.
Awesome. And I'm excited to see all your creations, honestly, but really excited to see this Rob Liefeld thing kind of come into shape and for everyone to see what you're working on with that. It's going to be so cool.
Yeah, I think a couple people here have seen the outline so far, so at least half of it. And my partner in crime, David Browers, he's full bore into it too, so it's going to be good. I'm excited.
Me too, man. Awesome. All right, Rick Lopez, what's going on, man?
What's up, guys? I'm still working on issue 2 for my series, The Power. I still have that on my big cartel at Doom Days. And then I'm working on my Cosmic Cat strip that Next Panel Press with David Grom, Eli Schwab, and Craig CK. We all have our own strip on there.
Hell yeah. And that's available on Webtoon, which leads into a little bit of what we're going to be talking about this week, which is taking the comics from beyond just the page and presenting it in a few different ways, working into the future to provide to provide more ways to enjoy these stories that we all create. So just recently in working with these guys, I've got into working with Webtoon, which is a whole different way. Now, I don't know if any of the other creators in the room have thought about Webtoon or thought about if and why they would want to take their creation to the next level. So if anyone is interested in talking about that or hitting on it, or any of the hosts want to hit that point, what are you guys thinking? Or raise your hand if you're already muted. And let's hear what you guys are thinking.
I just have like,
yeah, go ahead, Rick.
The main thing about Webtoons that I feel like is the most the main thing about Webtoons that I feel like is the best part about it is the fact, like, say when we're like sharing a lot of stuff in like the Cartoonist Kayfabe group, that sort of thing, or in like groups with a bunch of makers, we're basically just showing each other our work and that sort of thing. But whereas on Webtoons, the vast majority of people on Webtoons are going there to read stuff. So when you put your work on there, it's pretty much like majority is for readers and for customers, you know, and for people that could become fans. So I feel like it's so invaluable. And it's what, you just throw a couple panels on there, you know, that sort of thing. Like I do a page every 2 weeks. That's pretty simple. And there's so many guys on here that are way faster than I am that could put updates way quicker than I do. And I think it's invaluable. That's really what I have to say about it.
It's like a place to kind of get directly to your target market or something like that. Go ahead, Craig, and then we'll hit you, Sam.
It's just another avenue, right? Which is key. So it's like, you know, the more you put out, the better off you're going to be, right? If you're more visible, you know what I mean? And it's free. Like, you know, as long as you follow with, you know, within their guidelines, like it's a free hosting place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and it's a wide open market too. There's like a ton of people out there that are consecutively and consistently looking for new comics there on Webtoon.
Yeah, totally. There's exactly. Like there's people there just looking to.
Yeah, it's like Netflix. They literally want to binge.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Go ahead, Sam. What you got, man? I think you're muted still, bud. Sorry. I have to unmute you there.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. Yeah, I had a rough experience with Webtoons.
Really?
Yeah. One of the things is their content guidelines are really mercurial. I think it's like everything's good until somebody complains. I had a strip with no nudity in it, get flagged for having nudity, and none of the I wrote back, it's like, where's the nudity in this? There was like a panty shot, but that was it. And they're like, nope, you got to get rid of the nudity. And it's like, where is it? And they said, get rid of the nudity. And they kept taking my strips down. That was it.
They even have a way to say too, like this strip is 18 plus or something like that.
It was.
Yeah.
It was flagged as 18 plus.
But they still made you take it down.
They didn't make me take it down. They just took it down.
Oh yeah.
It was gone. And when I wrote back, I said, where is the nudity in this? They didn't tell me where. They just said, oh, there's nudity. And Craig, I've shared this I've shared the strip with you. It it's pretty tame. And I went through and I said, okay, here's this strip that's got nudity, here's this strip that's got nudity, here's this strip that's got nudity. Why am I getting flagged and they're not? And then bang, 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 those are all gone. Sorry, creators, I didn't mean to do that to you, but it was really like, if somebody complains, you're out, and there's no way to appeal it. And they just, their guideline is you can't have nudity or sexual content, and they won't define it or deal with it. So they'll just take it down. Now, there are lots of other systems like Webtoons out there. Webtoons is by far the biggest, but I've seen a bunch of others. I'm starting to put some stuff on the ninth of website, which is a French comics website. They're on Instagram. And there are, I think Global Comics is another one. They've reached out to me to put stuff up. And oh, what's another one? Oh, it's on the tip of my brain. It's another one I've looked at that I haven't done yet, but it's really iffy. Webtoons is a huge platform. It's a really good way to get exposure if you can find people to get to it. I think anything like Kickstarter or whatever, you're kind of on your own to publicize it. But if you get a following there, they have immediate access to your stuff. They've got a decent interface. They have good links to monetization. But I just found, their policies to be kind of, we're going to do what we want and screw you.
Gotcha. Well, that's a good segue into our first guest, who is experiencing a lot of luck on Webtoon and who is here to tell us a little bit about that. Craig, why don't you, I'm going to throw it to you for a little introduction here.
All right, our guest is originally from Seattle, went to Japan to learn animation, came back to work on her own comics and further her art career. She has a Webtoon following of over 15,000 people for her comic Half the Crown. She has, I guess, just about 500,000 views on her comics on there. She's a designer for an upcoming board game called Chibi Heroes, and was also winner of the 2018 and 2020, excuse my pronunciation, Securicon mascot contest. I've had the pleasure of getting to know her with some of the other guys in here, like Rick and Eli, working on grand design with her. Super pleasant. I've said it to her, both our guests tonight. If I was half as good as they are at what they do, I would be okay. And I'm very happy to announce Rosalie Higashi.
Hello.
Welcome. Also, take it away, Craig. Yeah.
Like I said, glad that you're here, first and foremost. I know you're really busy with family and all the stuff that you have on the go. We were just chatting about Webtoon. More specifically, Sam was telling us about his trouble with getting kind of flagged for nudity. Now, I know from being on your friends list this week, I think you had a little bit of that trouble this week as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting for their policy, and because so a guy can be topless, but yeah, just anything that implies like a nipple or something on a woman is very just like a slight implication, I guess. So I had a chapter that was taken down and it was automated. So I'm going to assume it's automated because someone actually pressed the report button, because it didn't specify like what it was. And so I actually had to go through it. And I originally thought it was like, because of the language choice, I had written the word poo-tang in it. So I changed it to something else and they responded with, it's actually not that. And then so they kind of screen capped what it was. And it was like the small, I added some concept art at the end, and it was like, one of my characters can like control ghosts or like ghouls and stuff. And so there was like a ghoulish girl behind him. And I just drew like the outline of her body, but I guess that was enough to imply that she was naked, even though it was such like a small part of the art. So I just actually had to remove it. And I still have yet to hear back from them and have it restored back to Webtoon.
So what's your overall experience been outside of that with Webtoon? Are you finding it's...
I haven't, to be honest, like I haven't tried to talk to the editors in any way, or it hasn't really been one of my goals to become like a Webtoon original, mainly because I am immunocompromised, I have kids, and there are other things that I would like to work on that like I just feel like, you know, if you're going to be a Webtoon original, I know that you have to crank out anywhere from like 50 to 100 panels a week. And so I just didn't know if I could commit to that. Not that I didn't want to, but if I just didn't have, you know, if I didn't have the ability, because I'm just like a one-person team. And from my understanding, a lot of the people that work on Webtoon originals, they have a colorist, they have somebody to work on the background. So it's not just them, you know, and I don't know the process for that. I don't know if like Webtoon sets you up with that, or if you just find that on your own, you know. I'm not familiar with how it's being run on the English website, because I know the Korean website is a lot more like there's a certain process for it, which is kind of different for us, for the English readers.
Your stuff is it's very highly polished. Like when you look at it, you know, because I'm always checking it out, right? I'm a follower of it, you know that. But it's got a high level of polish that I really like. You know what I mean? And
thank you.
could be a little bit of a fanboy because you know we've worked together and stuff and hung out, and you've helped all of us, especially Rick, Burgess, and myself setting up our Webtoon. So are you thinking about possibly other avenues outside of Webtoon with Half the Crown, or is that just solely for
I did
their
upload some chapters, I think like probably up to chapter 6 or 7 onto Tapas. And admittedly, I just kind of abandoned it after that. Not that I don't plan to put it up on there, but I believe there was like a move that happened after I did that. And so I still have yet to like get those files from my last computer and put it on here. And I've just been kind of lazy to do that. And I kind of have to do that to have those original files to upload to Tapas to like continue it. I know that a lot of people usually they'll upload on Tapas, and then if they moved on to another platform, they usually just update on Tapas, but say like, hey, I updated it, but here's a link that you can get to read it. But I haven't gotten that far.
Cool. Any plans on making like an actual book, like in a book form?
That would be great. So my original thing for this comic is I wanted it first and foremost to be free, accessible. And then I was trying to go through just kind of, I don't know if you would call it a business model or anything, but my hope is that it gets enough readers that if I ever make merch for it, or if I'm ever at conventions, because that's usually what I did pre-pandemic, was I do like 1 or 2 conventions a month and sell my illustrations, that just from that fan base, then accumulate some sort of, I guess, income that way. I do have a Patreon, and they've all been super patient with everything that I'm doing. I think I fulfilled, I made like my, I guess, my rewards on there, like pretty low hanging. Like, so for example, like if you donate $1, then I'll put your name at the end of every chapter. Or if you put in $5, you get access to like all the high res illustrations that I make. And so I have yet to make one for the month of May, but I have, I'm excited about the idea that I have for that one.
I think you need to wrap that shit up in a book. I know a pretty good publisher that floats around these parts that would probably help you out with that. But
yeah, no, I mean, I'm open to that, but I think I'm trying to focus on kind of having a more regular weekly thing. I actually been going through treatments for my blood disorder the past 5 weeks, and so updates for that have been pretty like infrequent. Like I try to do it every week, but my original schedule is supposed to be like Wednesday at 1 p.m. and now it's like sporadic. Could be a Monday, could be a Friday, you know, just kind of whenever I can and as much as I can until that time. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I've stolen most of your time here. I think we'll pass it on and let these guys chat you up a little bit.
Sweet. Thanks for that, Craig. So does anyone else have any other questions for Ro? I know we're going to, I know there's probably a lot. I do know, Ro, that you went to school for cartooning. Is that something you would want to talk about? Is that
Sure. So I had originally went to the Western Washington University up in Washington State. It's like right up next to the border of Canada, and they had an art program, and I didn't really particularly pick that school for any other reason other than I need a school with just an art program. And so I spent all of my high school years like making a really good, well, as good as I can get it, portfolio, and I was accepted into their art program, and so I was really happy about that. Unfortunately, I had really overbearing stereotypical Asian parents, and they were just like, what can you do with art, you know? And so at the same time, like my brother was like an art major, and so they were like upset that like 2 of their kids were artists. And so they basically said, if I don't choose to change my major, that like there would be some real problems. And so I did listen to them, which is not a terrible story. I ended up switching it to linguistics. And my parents were like, well, what's linguistics? And I said, oh, it's the science of language. They only heard the science part. So they were like, okay, that's fine, you know. So I did that, and I ended up falling in love very deeply with linguistics. I quite enjoyed it. And I actually met my husband there in the linguistics department. I actually thought he was an Asian American student like me, and I met him maybe 6 months before I graduated. And I think in my junior year of university, I had already secured a job to teach English in Japan with the linguistics degree. And he happened to be like an exchange student from Japan. So he heard, you know, that I was going to go to Japan in 6 months. So I think he thought like, hey, you know, we date, it's not going to be long distance because he's going back too. And so we continued our relationship while I was there. And I think after 2 years of living there and learning the language and everything, he suggested that I maybe pick up art again, because he's like, it's all you ever talk about, like you're really good. Like whenever we watch like cartoons together or anime or movies, like I always have to pause it and explain, you know, to him like, oh, this part's really cool because they like did this and did that. And so for him, he's like, wow, I've never really met somebody that was like a fan of stuff, but not necessarily in the same way that you would, not that there's anything wrong with it, of course, but like, you know, the normal fangirl and normal fanboy, like I was just really obsessed with like the creation and progression of how things are made. And so he suggested that I, you know, attend the manga school or animation school. It was like Yoyogi Animation School, and there's like chains in like several cities in Japan for it, but we happened to live by one. So it's like, you know, like what do you got to lose? Just do it. And it was surprising that the tuition for that was highly affordable, like including the materials and everything. Like in America, you think like art school, it's like arm and a leg, which, yeah. You know, I mean, you're thinking like what, like $50,000 a year or something, right? And literally one semester at this school, including all of the art materials, was $3,000. And so I took night classes, and because I had a full-time job. And so after the job, I'd come in with like, they made us wear like this, you know, uniform, because I was teaching at like an elementary school. And I would be the only one that comes into class and just like, you know, business looking attire. And everybody else, it was really interesting. Like the teacher was pierced and his hair was spiked up, but he was always very calm and composed. He had like studs and everything like all over his clothing. And then whenever he took out his pencil case, it would be like this cute stuffed dog that you zip, you know, open, and then he'd take out a pencil. And so it was really interesting for me. And then some of my female classmates, like more than half of the class were women. They were like gyaru. I don't know if you know what a gyaru is. It's like girls that tend to like, Japanese girls that tend to like dye their hair, and they wear like, they dress like they're going to the beach all the time, you know? And there was like a couple of gyaru girls, because apparently like gyaru manga is a huge thing over there. And then some of the girls would come in and like cosplay and things, and the guys would just like try never to talk to anybody. So I made friends with some of the gyaru girls there. I think just because like I'm not really, like I'm awkward, but I'm also not shy, or what people would think of as shy. And so I kind of resonate with, I think, a lot of people who tend to identify with gyaru culture that way, because they're kind of the same way, right? So I mean, because like you look at them and think like, oh, because they're, you know, wearing fake nails and they're like dolled up all the time, that they're probably judgmental. But like they were, for some reason, like they gravitated towards me and I them, and they didn't care how I dressed or looked. And that's usually what happened when I was over there. I remember homework assignments being very intensive, and like it was kind of hard, because sometimes like the teacher would say after every assignment, like there was only this many people that got 100, you know? And so very rarely would he say that. He would just be like, nobody got 100 on this score, so like don't feel bad if you see your score. And I thought he was like really encouraging. And so there was this one time that he handed everything back to us, and I got 100 on one of the homework. And basically the school trains you to become like a manga assistant. And so you can't do anything in Japan without a certification. Like you could be a native level speaker, but you, like if you're a Japanese citizen, like native level speaker like of a non-Japanese language. But if you are a Japanese citizen, they require that you get a certification to prove that. Like it doesn't matter if you can, it doesn't matter if like you write papers or whatever, if without that certification, it means nothing. And so manga school was just kind of the same deal, is that like, okay, we know you can draw, but we need to make sure that you know how to do everything. So when we sign you up to be like an apprentice with a comic artist, that you know what you're doing, right? And so that's what manga school was just to kind of do that. And so, but anyway, back to the story, like the teacher had passed back assignments and I got 100 on one. And I was like, oh, maybe, you know, everybody else did. And he kind of is like, nobody got 100. And then he looks directly at me and he goes, except one. Okay, moving on. And it, you know, I'm not a Japanese person, and like my Japanese wasn't perfect at that time. It still isn't. Like I kind of liken my bilingual ability to be like, I can understand perfectly, and it's probably broken when I speak, but normally I can, you know, communicate what I need. My children, I taught them Japanese, their native level somehow. So, like they're, you know, it's, but I kind of compared myself a lot to them. It was very intimidating because it's like a, you know, Japanese form of comic making. I'm not Japanese. Like he would do these things where we would do these exercises where we would like draw like comic thumbnails as fast as we could, and then we'd have to pass them to the right, and then everybody like, you know, gives feedback on the back of the page. And I remember all of the feedback I got were all bad. They said that like I swung the camera around too much, I put in too much details when there's thumbnails, like just that kind of thing. And it sounds like they're hating on you, but really it's true. Like you really need to like zip past during that like thumbnail stage. And I think they called it nemu. And that was one thing that I struggled with in that class, but I learned a lot. They taught you a lot about like, you know, how to draw bodies in a 3D space, how to make that 3D space, how to make everything correct in terms of like using kind of these mathematical formulas and lines to like, you know, oh, if you want to make like a foreshortened window or, you know, things like that. And so I'm glad for the experience. It was kind of surreal for me. At first I was worried, like as a foreigner, like, am I going to be okay in there? And before I started becoming a student there, like the school assured me, is like, oh, you know, we get foreigners all the time because there's animation studios in China, Philippines, and Korea, and they come fly over here. They, you know, learn here, they get their certification, and they go back, and then they get paid way more, you know, at their jobs at home. So they're like, this isn't new. Like people come in not knowing a lick of Japanese. Like I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, you'll be fine. And yeah, it was a good experience. It was very humbling, very interesting. And I think it's one of those things like, yeah, it'll kind of stay with me forever. It's a very fond memory, thankfully. No bullying or anything.
That's good. Do you find that, you know, being from the US and then going over there, did you read comics over here, and then did you find that there was like a big difference? And I know we know the difference, I guess, visually between like manga and American comics, but like the creation of manga versus American comics, what did you find was like the differences there?
So the word manga in itself just means motionless pictures. And so there's a part of one of the characters of manga is also one of the characters in the word that they use for movies, which is eiga. So the ga part is the same character. And so for eiga, it's like moving frames, basically. And then for manga, it's just like motionless frames, right? But essentially both of them kind of are supposed to convey the same thing, a form of movement, right? And actions and things. And I find in American comics, and this is not a knock on American comics at all, is that a lot of the motion is like implied, like in between transitions between panels, or you tend to have more, like they tend to cram more speech bubbles into like one into one panel as much as possible without losing the implication of movement or anything. And in that way, you kind of get more bang for your buck for like one page, right? Because there's more story jam packed into there, and it's not like, I think American readers have the patience to kind of go through it, right? And like when they skip over something, they can always go back. And, you know, I think for Japanese audiences, they don't have that patience. And so they tend to just skim through it. So you cannot, and I know like, I don't know if this is like an OCD part of like Japanese culture, but it's like, it's usually quality over quantity. And so I think one of the biggest virtues I think in that culture is to be understood. And so I think possibly out of paranoia for being misunderstood, they're going to convey every sort of movement in every panel. So you'll often see a lot of panels that won't miss a beat with the movements. For me, being an American, I try to go with that, but then at the same time, I have to remember that the people that like crank out these chapters on a weekly basis over there, they have a whole team, right? And that's why they can do that. Whereas I am just one person. And so I think with like Webtoons or webcomics, especially with the scrolling up and down format, I don't really have to think too deeply into the panel layout, because, you know, it's just scrolling up. And then at the same time, like I can kind of incorporate things from American comics that make it easier for me, where I don't have to like imply every single movement, because it's like, but at the same time, not too much so it preserves like a cinematic feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Let's move out here. Anyone else have any questions? Oh, okay. Jerome's got a question. That surprises me. Yeah. Honestly. What up, Rome? Where you at? Oh, there you go. All right, asking to unmute you.
He does these sketches. I just.
Oh. So, hi, Ro. My name is Jerome.
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you. But no, seriously, when you're working on Webtoon, you were talking about the difference in basically in pacing, in pacing between manga and American comics. Do you find yourself going more the manga route when it comes to pacing when you're working on a Webtoon, or like American comics, or is it like newspaper strip kind of pacing? Because the more that I'm learning about like all this kind of stuff, the more I realize like, oh man, I like there is a difference, right? There is a difference, because I thought, you know, comics was comics, but as you get into niches and you learn more, you know,
yeah.
I just don't know like, well, what goes on in your head at that.
I think I usually go by the personal rule, which is it's not one that I've and I don't know if I'm executing it like as well as I'd like to, but what I try to do is like during the kind of sit down talking scenes where like just two people are static and they're talking to each other, I try to incorporate like Korean and American comic style during that conversation, because I feel like it fits. It makes it so it's not abnormal to have a lot of like speech bubbles like crammed all into one panel. And it's like, you know, since there is no movement, like that's okay. But when it comes to like the action scenes or the fight scenes, I try to model after the Japanese comic form, if that makes sense. Because I really enjoyed as a kid just having like the different angles, especially like I think for American comics, like they tend to have like the full body character or the full body drawing of like both characters fighting each other. And so you kind of see like the whole pinup, right? But for Japanese comics, they kind of focus on just the point of contact, you know, and then there's like this weird, like crazy angle from there. Yeah, and so that I'm kind of a sucker for that kind of thing. So I try to do that, but then I say that, but then when I look back at I think the second fight scene for Half of the Crown, like I did tend to, like, I think my mind was just obsessed with like, no, they got to see the feet. So like I made sure to make it kind of a more.
You need the slide. Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. That's awesome. Thanks, Ro.
Thank you. That was a fun question.
All right, next question here we have is from William Hoffnecht here. What's up, man? I'm asking to unmute.
There we go. You got me?
Gotcha.
All right. I'm sorry. My internet's acting wonky, so I may cut in and out a little bit. I apologize. So I had to drop off again because of my internet. So you might have actually covered a little bit of this, but when I came back in, you were talking about kind of the scrolling nature of Webtoons, which I find super intriguing. I'd never seen or heard of this until about a year and a half ago. I got hooked up with a young cartoonist that I was helping kind of train and edit her stories, and she specifically was building stories for that format, right? The scrolling up and down for Webtoon format. And so I had to kind of dive in and read a whole bunch to kind of get an idea and get a feel for what that was going to be. And I'm kind of curious, how do you kind of see the strengths and the weaknesses of that kind of format versus more of a traditional page turn type of format? And then how do you see, like, because I see from an editor point of view, when I was working with her, I'm trying to, like, how do I get the same feeling I get from like a double page splash, right, in like a book? How do I get that same feeling but in a scrolling format? Or how do I stretch time? Or how do I, minimize time, or things like that? So I'm curious what your kind of thoughts on playing with the format and especially with timing are.
Yeah, so for the double page spread, especially when there's like a movement conveyed in that spread, I've seen two ways of doing it. I haven't personally gotten to that level yet because like I'm going with the method of like starting out kind of low, and then hopefully for the end scenes I can save it for that, but what I've seen is there's two ways. It's I don't really like this way because when you turn your phone or you turn your device or whatever, like the whole thing turns to, and you're like, right? But some people will take that 2-page spread and then make it vertical, and then when you scroll up, like you'll see it that way. And that, I think that would work well if the 2-page spread was for that vertical layout anyway, right? So if the movement is like up to down, or or down, or something like that. Yeah, up, yeah, from the up down. So I imagine, for example, like if a person is like punching down, and then you see, as you're scrolling up, you see like the head, and then like the arm, and then the point of contact, and then you scroll even more, and then there's the other person like, right? Like I've seen it work that way. Or this second version, which I kind of like, and I think I'll probably attempt in the future. They'll have it so they'll draw the character multiple times, but you'll only see them once for every scroll. So for example, if they're like zipping through, or like punching a bunch of people, or like, hitting a bunch of villains, you'll see it once there. And then as you scroll up, there's like, you see a different part of the room, but then you'll see them again, like punching. So it looks like the person's like moving throughout the room and punching that way. And I like the way that is done more than the first version, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so one thing that we played with when we were piecing there was like literally like we would stretch a scene, like the art long and huge, right? And kind of do things like to try to make the timing different, and really kind of play with that. So I found it really interesting. So cool. Yeah, it's just a different format. It's a different way to think about timing in comics. Yeah,
there's something about it that I find easier to think. I think because there's not a lot of pressure. So I think I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself. So like if I love the way that the page format is, like the flip page format, because each page is literally like a Picasso painting, right? There's movement, your eyes move from one panel to the other, and when you do it really well, you don't even have, the reader isn't confused where they're supposed to go. Like even if you don't follow like traditional I guess layouts for it, as long as you make the movement like smart enough, or move your speech bubbles around smart enough, like the reader will know what to do. And so that part, I really like it for that. But I think what I find is whenever I create art, I feel like there's always like kind of my inner critic hovering behind me, just being like, you super suck, right? And so every time I see like the last panel that I've made before, like I'm like, ooh, that didn't look very good. Like, and then I'll feel terrible like progressing through that page, right? So with Webtoons, I just scroll up and I don't see that last thing that I drew. And so it kind of takes the pressure off of me, coincidentally.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Sorry, I was muted there. We're gonna go to Sam Blanchard now. He's got his next question here. I asked you to unmute.
All right,
What's
I'm
up, Sam?
unmuted. I just wanted to chime in on Will's question and maybe get Rose's thoughts on this. I had another strip that I was doing on Webtoons that I was playing with, making it a continuous vertical scrolling format. So there's action that you kind of just spill through from one end to the other. Is this undersea thing going on? And so like you'd have motion at the top and character dives down through, and as you like just kind of roll through vertically. I was playing with what I could do with just one long continuous panel that I'd like, break into Webtoon size slides, but they fit together seamlessly. Just playing with that. I think understanding comics, he goes through, Scott McCloud talks about like in the web format, you have the option to create these long panoramic vertical scrolling things for Webtoons or horizontal scrolling things for Instagram, perhaps. And I've been playing on both those formats with that. If you read XKCD, he goes through and he creates some very like crazy things with that format that he does on his web format. If you read the SKCD comics, and if you don't, you should. He does some really creative things, and I think it's going to be interesting because he's coming from an engineering standpoint as opposed to an artistic standpoint. So that's that, Eli. You can move on.
Yeah, I think there's lots of possibilities of stuff that you could do with Webtoon and like doing it in a bunch of different ways. So, Ro, another thing we're talking about here is moving beyond the page and moving beyond comics. Did you ever think about wanting to pitch your story as far as like an anime or as cartoon or anything like that? Or
I mean, that would be awesome, right? I think every graphic novel creator like kind of dreams about that, right? That's kind of part of the end game, or end game for that project at least. I'm a little concerned about it. I'm a little nervous. I did the Pixar method of making the ending first and then moving backwards.
Oh, interesting. And
so I decided like, I want the ending to have this. I want the reader to be feeling this. And then I worked backwards thinking like, but how can I do that? And that was kind of an idea that I think I attempted probably 6 or 7 times incorrectly. And Half of the Crown is just kind of like the latest attempt that I think I'm going to stick with. And though I realized that your reader can tell if you're being authentic or not. And so I realized I was making the mistake of not putting anything about myself or what I believe, what I think into the comic, out of fear that I would make the characters basically like a self-insert Mary Sue, or, and I realized that there's a way to do it without seeming like that. Like it doesn't have to turn out like Twilight or something. And not that my story is anything like Twilight, just putting that out there.
No, it's not.
So like I'm a little nervous because the whole, I guess, end game for me is that I was very much saved and raised by comics. And similarly with like, Christians where they like read the Bible and everything and it teaches them right from wrong and everything. For me, that was comics. And so I want this to be kind of that for youth who read it, youth and adults, basically. And I worry that the stuff that I'll put in the middle and near the end will be too much. I think that's a big fear for me. And so because of that, like pretty heavy, I mean. And so because of that, I worry that nobody will pick it up after that. But at the same time, it's kind of something that I feel like in my bones that I need to do. So there's that comic artist and writer, his name is Dan Tripp, and he made that one comic like kind of recounting talking about his experience as a child and everything, and the traumas that he went through. And I believe you can like, get it. I think you only have to pay like $1 for it, and you can get the digital copy of that. But I remember in 2008, I had emailed him and I let him know like what I was planning on doing with some of the story and the characters. And because I saw that he just kind of did it like, unabashedly, and he wasn't feeling like ashamed about things. And so, I asked him like, so how do you deal with that pushback? And he said, I think if it's something that you feel like needs to be said, that's it. That's kind of all you need. So I think because of that, I'm kind of not really trying not to hope for the possibility of it becoming a series. If it does, because the main character is Blasian and because it is a very diverse cast, I will probably, hopefully, need to enlist the help of Black Americans or other people that can speak to the cultural parts of the characters, because like I'm only Filipino American, right? So I only know my experiences as Filipino American. So I've thought about it, like if it ever gets to that stage where somebody says, hey, we want to make this into a series, I'm gonna have to demand that, okay, well at this point you need someone more than just me, right? And because like when it's a comic format, similarly with a novel, like your brain is gonna put in all of what it needs to make it fit, to make it comfortable for you reading it, right? But that's different when it's kind of like an on-screen moving thing with real voices, and where they start to feel more like organic people. And not that they don't feel like organic people like on comics, obviously, but I think there's just because it brings it to such a broader audience, because with comic readers, like we understand how to interpret them, we understand how to read them. So there's like kind of this universal language that we all get, that we don't need to, like, we won't misunderstand like the intent of the creator or anything. But unfortunately, when it gets to like something like Netflix or whatever, like it becomes open to a broad audience who don't read comics. And I don't know how to interpret that. So I've always thought that if it ever gets to that level, I have to enlist people who know what to do about it, because I don't.
I get you.
That makes sense.
Maybe that's sometimes why it gets muddy. Like sometimes when you're watching that comic book adaptation on TV, you're like, this is nothing like what I wanted. This is not like my book, but and maybe that's because, they brought in all these other people and they're like, this doesn't translate to television. And you're
like, I guess I would hope that it would be people who would honor the book and not change too much of it, but at the same time, like know what to adapt for an on-screen movement,
right.
In a better way that maybe I haven't seen like from my own personal experiences, if that makes sense. And so I guess trying to find somebody who would just, I guess maybe a fan of the work, right? Because if they're a fan of the work, you would think they wouldn't try to change it.
Yeah, right. You would think.
Or you would hope anyway. So we'll see. I don't know, one step at a time.
Exactly. And, that's kind of just what we're exploring here is like, I think too that like for any creator, they would want to expand their, into other media. But I think that there's also maybe some people who are like, no, dude, like mine is just comics. I'm not looking to expand. I would never want,
Yeah. So I find a lot of series do really well when the creator is on the team, right? Is involved. So that's why Invincible did so well, because even though they switched stuff around, it was over the, it had the approval of Robert Kirkman and things. And then for people who watch anime, like the latest Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I actually spoke with the art director for that studio that did the latest one, and they made it as true to the comics as they could. And so I asked him, like, what was that decision making like? And he said, well, actually, the reason why it turned out that way was because the original artist of the comics, she actually came in, and and kind of didn't really tell us what to do, but was just there to make sure we didn't change anything. And he said, and so, you know, the first 6 months she would come in every day and see what we're doing. And then I think as she, you know, we started to build some trust, she realized, okay, you guys got this. So she's, you know, would just maybe call in once a month or whatever. And so I think that part's really important. Like when the original creator kind of has a role in that.
Yeah, I agree. And also too, Invincible is an amazing example because Kirkman was definitely involved, and Ryan Otley did all the, you know, character designs, and they got all, I mean, they stuck really close to it. And, you know, and what we all strive to, I think too, is like when you have a strong enough story and when you're the story changes and beats are so strong, they're like, man, why would we change anything like this, you know?
But I think, and just to butt in a little bit, is something to take note of is that when you are adapting a property for a different medium, the rules are different, right? So a creator can't be so controlling that you have to shoot the comic book, right? Otherwise it's going to fail. I mean, there's many movies where they attempted that and it failed, right? You have to understand that it's a different language, and that means that things have to change, I think, right? At least to some extent, right? In order to meet that language, just like comics has its own language, and that's why you can't just adapt a movie directly to comics exactly as the movie shot. It won't really work. I mean, there's many examples of that, you know, where you have to allow a certain amount of creativity to kind of play with that different language, but also make sure make sure you still capture the essence, right, of what the original product was going for.
Ro, before you bounce, I just wanted to comment a couple things. Were you talking about the Dean Tripp book, Something Terrible?
Oh, did I say Dan Tripp? Yeah, Dean Tripp. Yes, that
Yeah,
one.
no, I just, oddly enough, as you guys know, David Browers read that to me this week. It was the first time I had experienced it, and he was reading it to me on video and like showing me the pages, and I was like, that book. I can't stress enough that like people need to check that book out. It is crazy.
And
really,
he's accessible too. Like I was surprised he even responded to me. Like
those scenes with the gun to his head as he's creating and stuff. Like you guys got to check it. If you guys haven't checked it out, do yourselves a fucking favor and check that book out. The other thing is before we jump off, what else have you got on the go? I wanted to. That was my last thing I really wanted to get at. Is there something in the works that you haven't really spoken about? Something bigger, something beyond what you're doing now?
Sorry, me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've just been kind of pouring all of my hopes and dreams into Half the Crown at the moment. As for other things, I am participating in the Weapon X thing, and
Cool.
I don't know if we are allowed to talk about the other one. So just that, and then I don't even have like any preliminary groundwork laid down for this at all, but I'd like to make an art book with the mascot design that I made for the SakuraCon 2020, just because since there was no convention in 2020 and then no convention in 2021, it was like the same mascot for the last 2 years. And so I kind of want to like, okay, well, I mean, since they've been seeing it for a while, maybe I could make like an art book of that character kind of going through what we kind of went through during this pandemic, you know, just like laying at home in our pajamas and watching TV or things like that, you know, mundane things, nothing spectacular.
Everyone here needs to go check out her Webtoon stuff, and I mean it. It's got like a high degree of polish to it, and it always kind of speaks to me a little bit, whether it's the lighting effects or whatever. It always kind of, you're always finding something new, and I appreciate you coming tonight and giving us.
Thank you for the kind words. That's really
I'm sure everyone does.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ro, for coming. And I know it wasn't named after me, but it's just cool. There's an Eli in your comics. Of course, I respect that. And so cool. Do you want to stick around, Ro, or do you want to bounce, or you got to bounce, or?
Around, so you guys can chat.
Okay, word. So if anyone thinks of any more questions for Ro, or and I'd love to hear a little bit of back and forth between her and our next guest, who is an LA-based comic and storyboard and concept artist. And at 19 guys, what were you doing at 19? I was not this collected. At 19, he formed a boutique animation house before he then became a teacher for 18 years. Now he's a full-time freelance illustrator with his work published in even this month's Heavy Metal, as well as the Creep Show TV show. Doing like comic book scenes for the Creep Show TV show. His books Lost Angeles, which we're going to talk about a little bit, was optioned. And Witch Heart and Devilskin are some of his horror comics. They're available on Comixology and from his website. This is Chris Anderson, y'all. He's also an amazing musician. I wish we would have set up a brief concert, but maybe we can get that a different time. So Chris Anderson, what's up, man? How's things going? And so I think the first thing I really want to ask you about, hold on, let me get these pins going on. The first thing I really want to ask you about, at 19, you started a boutique animation facility. What went into that? What did you guys work on? And like, how'd you get that going like at 19?
Well, I moved I went to college. I'm from Minnesota, and I went to college for a year there. And it wasn't my thing. I wanted to go to Cal Arts, and I was in a band in high school, and my drummer and my real good friend is Nate Richard, who played Harvey on the original Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the boyfriend. And so during a break in college, he flew me out to California, and I said, well, this is the place that I've got to be. So I came out here and I tried to get into Cal Arts, and I didn't get in because they said that I wasn't angry enough.
Not angry enough.
God, that's terrible. I guess now I am. So Nate was kind of riding high on the TV show at the time. And he kind of said, well, let's focus on music. You could focus on your art and, quit your job. I was cleaning aquariums at the time. And we moved, it was he, myself, and Michael Pena, who is an actor, also moved into a place together. And there was a guy down the hall who was an animator. And he was sort of trying to get off the ground with this boutique animation house that he was starting up. And so I was really interested in, doing it. And I already knew how to storyboard. So I put in the money that I was going to spend on college. I put in to this boutique animation studio. And so we had an office at Hollywood Center Studios, and we did intros for a lot of BET stuff. We did the Soul Train intro. Whoa. And we worked on a show called Urban Up that happened, and so we got to the pilot for that. I don't know, actually I don't think it happened. I think we just had the pilot, but Destiny's Child was the act on that show, so we got to hang out with them for back in the day before they all became whatever they are now. And and so it was a lot of fun. I put together pitches. I did the storyboards. We had some stuff that was like almost ready to go at Nickelodeon. Wu-Tang came in and wanted us to do a Wu-Tang cartoon, and I was going to do some of the comic book too, but it all kind of just fell apart. Turned out that the guy who I was partners with was kind of putting my money up his nose, and it didn't pan out very well. So I kind of got sad about it, and I just did not want to do art anymore. And my comics career that I wanted to get off the ground got derailed. And so I was like, God, I was doing all these things that I felt like were for me doing artwork. And so I said, well, I want to do something that's good, not just for me, but for everybody else. So I got into teaching, and I started doing that for a long time. But the comics kept calling me back. I just knew that that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a comic book artist. That's it. That's fate. It's destiny. That's what I'm going to be.
Dang, man. That's amazing. DG Sepulveda said, wait a minute while we pick up all these names. I'm like, I know, dude. So many people you worked with. It's like insane. Go ahead, Craig. I know you wanted to ask more about the Wu-Tang.
Yeah. So was that the image stuff that they were doing that they wanted?
Yeah, the image stuff that they were doing. And I'm not sure. It's hard to recall. My 20s were my early 20s are a blur. There was a lot of consumption of things going on at that time too. So it was like, it was a rock and roll and hip hop animation studio, man. Yeah, I think it was the image. I think it was the image book.
Yeah,
it might have been
good that you missed that. I don't know if you ever read those, but it might have been a good thing you missed out on that.
He gave me the first issue when we had a meeting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you could have morphed it into something like extremely better than what it turned out to be.
At the time, I could not have. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I was not ready.
Yeah. I don't know. I just want to take time real quick. Again, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Big fan, as you know. Same thing I said to Ro. If I was half as good as you, I'd be fucking okay, bro.
Come on, man.
Follower of your work. I was, like our previous guest, I was really lucky to work with you, and you've always been really gracious, both you and Ro, again, with your time and answering my questions. I love the stuff you're doing right now, and I really want you to talk about heavy metal.
Well, the honor's mine.
It's tough to lift. It's
rusty.
Yeah. What do you want me to talk about?
Everything.
About it?
Whatever you want. How did you get in? Like, what's the process? Like, everything that you can.
So the way that I got in is while I was still teaching, I had done my book Lost Angels, and was really serious about getting out of teaching and becoming a full-time comic book artist. It's just what I wanted to do. I got real serious about it. And so I started making friends and acquaintances with professionals and just asking everything that I could about the industry, how to get ahead in it, really. And I became friends with Tim Seeley, who's the creator of Hack Slash and Revival. And he's an editor at Heavy Metal. And one day I woke up with an email from him asking if I could do 12 pages in a Creep Show comic book in, I think it was 6 days. They didn't have a comic script. They just had like a TV script. And I had, in 6 days, I had to take this TV script, turn it into a comic book script, draw 12 pages, get it out the door. It was brutal, it was grueling, and it was the first major thing that I did, but I had to do it, and because I was able to get it in and turn it around so fast, they were just so impressed, I guess, that Tim was like, whatever, I'm trying to get you into heavy metal. Justin Jordan, the author of Luther Strode with Tradmore, and many other things. He had written a story and Tim wanted me to draw it. So I was able to do that, get into the one. And I said, gosh, at this point, I'm working with all these great writers. I want to write too, though. I mean, I want to auteur these comics that I'm making. And I want to handle everything, the colors, the lettering, everything. And just go as heavy metal as I possibly can. Can I write my own? And he said, yeah, well, why don't you pitch me something, and I'll talk to the, head of the company or the president of the company. And so the first one that I pitched to him was called Last Planet, Other Side of the Sun. And so I said to myself, if I'm going to make a heavy metal story, I'm going to make it as heavy metal as I can. It's going to be sci-fi. It's going to be horror. It's going to be gross. There's going to be boobs. It's just, this is the formula for heavy metal. It is.
Yeah.
And so I just went for it and made the most heavy metal comic that I possibly could. And I did it, and it came out and it looked great. And I had another idea after that, and I pitched it, and they loved that. And then a friend of mine who is a writer who I've known for like 20 years wrote this really great story that I wanted to draw. And so I brought that to them. And so they said yes to that. And just, you know, I'm 4 for 4. I'm gonna keep this trend going.
Hey, you're batting 1,000. Good for you, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sneak one more in here, Eli, and then you can yell at me after.
No worries, dude. Definitely.
I know you're a He-Man mark, much like some of us in here.
Mm.
Did you happen to see? There you go. Jerome's got the book up. I think very nice. Did you happen to see the Kevin Smith shots yesterday? And
I did.
What's your feeling on that?
I'm optimistic that he will handle it well. It's hard. I mean, it's not going to be my He-Man. Mm-hmm. but it's going to be somebody's He-Man. It's going to be somebody's Masters of the Universe. And I'm all for getting things out there and for people, you know, becoming a fan of the stuff, the properties. I played with the toys when I was a kid, and it storytelling wise, it affected me even to this day. You know, I burned all of my He-Man guys in the final battle when I was a kid. They made a heck of a sound when they melted. but yeah, I mean, they were just ripe for a while for me to just revisit those character designs. There's such great character designs. So I did this one here was just like 31 days of me drawing the characters. And then this one here is me telling a story with the characters as if there was no canon, you know, and I just didn't use any names, just drew the characters. So hopefully, and then so I just gave that out on my Patreon. Yep.
And it's a very good Patreon for anyone that doesn't know. Join up.
I try.
Yeah, it's a good job. Very good job. All right, I'm done hijacking this shit.
Nah, man. No low jacking. All right, so Sam's got his hand up, and y'all, I know you guys got some questions. You got something to say, a point to make, anything you want to. Painter muralist. See, that's a creator. All right, go ahead, Sam. Unmute yourself. I'm gonna ask to unmute. Go for it, bud.
I'm unmuted now.
Hey.
So, you know, kind of I wanted to raise my hand because no one else did. And I just want to say, hey, it's nice to kind of see you virtually.
Yes.
And, you know, thanks for, you know, all the support and help online. We've been chatting back and forth and watching your stuff. I guess the one thing I always like to, you know, find out from people is sort of, you know, just kind of riff on like your creative process. So you're starting to do the writing and the art together for this heavy metal story, and you know, again, I saw the stuff that you're putting up. I see your orthopedist for that wrist that's going to fall apart on all those lines you're drawing, and see counseling books. That's too many. But so you're writing and drawing these stories. What's your process for developing the plot and the thumbnails and the story together?
You know, right now I've just been doing a lot of short stories. So the opportunity hasn't been there for me to do anything more long form myself. All the long form stuff I've been working with another writer on. But for the short stories that I do, I don't know, so things just kind of come to me. And then from there, I just sort of let them evolve in my head. Always has to be just something weird and something I haven't seen before, and strange creatures is sort of my sweet spot. So I go from there. So
does the story evolve on paper, just visually, or
it evolves here?
Yeah.
And then from here, I take it and I'll start messing around in my sketchbook a little bit. Not precious at all with it. And then once I have the story in my head and I know how many pages I need, then I do the math and figure out like there's going to be a beat per page, you know, and then I'll kind of board it out that way and then do the dialogue over the top of it. That's sort of how I do it.
And then when your editor says you have one too many pages,
I haven't had that problem yet. it's short stories are super challenging. If you've got a big story in your head, it's really hard to boil it down to, 12 pages or whatever. But,
yeah.
You got to meet it. You got to meet the challenge.
Yeah. I my part of my experience with Grand Disaster when I was in it is, I working with the authors. I was working with Mark Darden. I was working with Greg Giordano, and we'd have like these big stories. And it's like, okay, we got 3 pages. And it's I could make 10 pages on this thing, 15 pages. And no, it's got to fit
in 3. You can't be linear, you've got to break it up and summarize it in some way.
Yeah. And I Will has edited me a couple times already.
Cool. All right. So now we got Will, and then it looks like Ben's trying to put his hand up. I can't. Oh yeah, it's at the bottom in the reactions where you see like the smiley face. But there you go. All right, Ben, you're next. Thanks again, Sam, for that.
Oh, I just love chatting.
Yeah, right. And I'm glad that some of the people that have been working together, especially on these projects, are getting to connect. So what's up, Will?
Hey, so just a question that I'm always interested with working creators is, I think that it's super important for working, like some working creators are and when I say working, I mean like full-time, right? Like people who pump out pages constantly. I think that it's important to kind of still have some kind of, to keep up with reading what's coming out, or reading artists or creators or new comics that are coming out. And some creators have a lot of hard time with that. And I'm curious how you balance it. Like do you have books that you're still reading every month? Do you have, or how much time do you seek out new stuff and the stuff coming out, if at all?
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard because, and the other thing is you can't just read comics either. Right. If you're going to try to grow, you got to read, regular old books too. But it's hard. It's hard. It really is. And I don't have a lot of time to do it. I have about every single app that you possibly could on my iPad, and I'll pull things up. I don't have a regular monthly book that I read. I've kind of grown out of a lot of the superhero books. But I have to have my finger on the pulse of the industry too, because I could be asked to, take the reins on a book one day. And so I have the Marvel app, I have the DC app, and even though it's months behind, I'll go through and I'll pick it out, and I'll, flip through and I'll say, like whose artwork do I like, and kind of like read a bit of the stories, and if anything catches me, I'll stick with it. Monsters just came out, and I gotta tell you guys, I'm a different cartoonist than I was before I read that. It's really, really a masterwork, and it's changed my perspective on a lot of things. So I have to rethink everything now. But besides that, I follow artists more than I do writers. So I'm a big fan of Daniel Warren Johnson stuff and what James Herron's doing right now. Both of them writer artists, and a lot of times I feel like I gravitate towards writer artists because they have the full control of the reins. There's no disconnect. And a lot of times, unless you're working with a writer that like I work with David Ocampo a lot. We did Lost Angels. We're doing these one-shot horror stories. We're working on a few other things together, and we just know each other. And I work with another writer named Mark Sable on something, and we work really well together. But you can run into writers that they'll trip you up, and if I was to get on another book at a DC or a Marvel or something like that, who's to say how good my art will be, because the script will influence me so much. So I just feel like a lot of the writer artists have more of a grasp on the book, and the book is better for it.
Yeah.
That was a tangent, I know.
No, it is. And I think it's interesting because there are a lot of what's interesting is to find, when you find a writer you like that has very specific idiosyncrasy, a very specific way of writing. it's really interesting to see the way different artists interpret them, right? When they work with different artists, or whether they work and do their own art. And so it's always kind of interesting to see. So one quick last thing before I pass you over, since you brought up Barry Windsor Smith, I got your pages for Weapon X. Just a quick shout out, like, do you want was there, since you said monsters kind of changed the way, was there anything in doing that process that kind of you thought about, or anything in your mind when doing those pages for Ek?
Yeah, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. I read Weapon X last week for the first time. I didn't even I didn't even read it before I doing the Weapon X thing. But I have seen his work and his pages, and I was never a fan of Barry Windsor Smith. I loved his rune stuff, but his faces always bugged me for some reason, because everybody looks the exact same. But it's not about that, and it's not about the faces. It's about the way that he tells the story. And I guess I didn't understand that before reading Monsters. So I went back and I read Weapon X, but I did notice when I did the Weapon X pages, I think we've discussed this a little bit, how there was like some beats in his panel layouts, and I just didn't understand why it was there. And I think we kind of figured out that it was a comedy beat, and I still don't get why he did it there, because the comedy beat for me feels like it's in the wrong place, but that was his choice. And so yeah, it was it reminded me of Bernie Kriegstein's use of panels and space and time and things like that, and things that I am trying to incorporate in my own work. You know, I'm just trying to be the best cartoonist that I can possibly be, learn every single little thing and pull it all in and make it my own. And doing those Weapon X pages allowed me to see, you know, a different way that you can do it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
That was for me, drawing those Weapon X pages. It was amazing. It was a great learning experience to learn from the master. And speaking of amazing Weapon X pages and an amazing artist, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to his very first Zoom call ever, his first Zoom question, the one and only Ben Perkins. What's up, dude? Go ahead.
I hope there's not more than me. I hope there's not more than one of me. That would be horrible. My question, first of all, nice to meet you, Chris, virtually.
Hey, you too, man.
Yeah, dude, I'm very happy to be in a book with you. That's pretty cool. My question was going back to when you're working on that TV script to convert it to the comic. What was that like? What were the pros and cons of that? What were kind of some of the virtues of TV scripts versus comics? And then what are some of the virtues of comics versus the TV script? Did you have trouble condensing?
It was a nightmare.
That down, you know, because I graphic novel that was pitch. Yeah, so like, how did you handle that? What was the process for that? I'm curious.
The process was, here's the script. You got 6 days to do 12 pages. Get it done. The fire is underneath you. So I think it was like a 16-page television script. It was supposed to be for one of the seasons of Creepshow. I think probably the first, would have been the first season of Creepshow, that they couldn't get the actors that they wanted to for it. And so Greg wanted me to make it into a comics, the part of the comic. But the thing is Greg's a genius. Greg is an absolute genius at what he does, but he doesn't do comics. And so I think that he kind of thought that if you handed a script to somebody, they could do 12 pages with that script in 6 days. And it's really challenging. So I had to take the 16 pages and kind of beat them out without losing anything into 12. So I kind of, I'm trying to think back to how I did it. It was so fast. I think that I made 12 thumbnails. I made the final one and I made the first one, and I just sort of beaded out the scenes and tried to make them fit into those 10 pages in between. Keeping in mind the page
Did
turn.
you rewrite the script then?
What's that?
Right. Did you end up rewriting the script, like verbally, or did you just transcribe it as thumbnails?
I did a little bit of alteration on the script, and then editorial went in and took care of it from there, because then Greg Nicotero had to go and look at it and see if that was okay. But it needed to be done it needed to be at the printer on day 6, and so as I'm getting it done immediately, right, the colorist has to color it, just like overnight, everything. It was real fast. So I think they took one pass over it and changed some things.
So just one final thing before I hog all your time. As far as like camera angles and stuff, were they like noted in the TV script and you had to like maybe reinterpret that, or were they on point with some of the things? Like, what was inspiring you to make some like of your camera choices and angles and stuff from that script?
I don't think that there were any camera angles in the script. I think that it kind of, I don't know. I go off of intuition a lot, probably much more than I should, honestly. But I think I just kind of sensed where things needed to be. And I knew that this was a big punch, or that this was supposed to build tension or things like that. And so I handle, the framing, and I handle the shot differently, depending on what it needs. Long and short of it. I think Ben.
That's cool, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, there you
go. Here. Yeah, no, my internet is kind of wonky because I live in a weird area, but I appreciate answering those questions, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for that, Ben. Good to see you on here. All righty. Next question we got from Jerome Cabanatan.
What's up, Jerome?
One and only.
What's going on, Chris?
What's up, man?
Hi, I'm Jerome.
Nice to meet you. Jerome and I did the final fight scene in Grand Design together. He masterfully choreographed that monster.
Oh yeah.
And then showed me how to draw it, right? but yeah, big fan. I do dig the Patreon. Okay, the not man nor beast. I think a lot of people have probably played that story when they were playing with their toys, but that's not my question. You seem to have because like you're like an artist, like you have like your from music to storyboarding to animation to comic art, and just probably just straight up illustration. As a creator and a consumer, do you consciously draw? Because I know you draw from all those things. Like you can't really help it. But do you consciously draw from from those different pieces of art, like those different styles of art or different disciplines? Like when you're doing a page, are you thinking like a storyboarder, or like this, or does it cross over? Does it melt? Like how does that work in your head?
No, there's such different disciplines, to be honest with you.
So it doesn't really mix?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, of course, there's some little things that'll cross, but the way that you tell a story for a commercial or a TV show or a movie is totally different than the way that you would tell a TV show for a comic. And comics, in a lot of ways, have an infinitely more choices that you can possibly make to keep the story engaging and interesting. And a lot of times when you do TV show and stuff, it's about blocking and lenses and things like that, which to some degree it is in comics too, but I don't think in terms of film when I do comics. And musically, I can't listen to music when I work.
Do you think about the score while like, let's say like you're drawing a page, and do you kind of like think about the score while you're making that page? Because that last page that you did with the the circle library thing.
Yeah.
That the one that Sam said that you were gonna mess up your hand. Like when I when you look at, like, I can hear sci-fi music, right? Like you can hear that score. Like, does that happen to you when you're like, no? Okay.
Honestly, it doesn't. The weirdest thing happens to me when I'm drawing, and if I think about music, I feel like all music is childish, and it's the funniest thing because I'm drawing comic books. I don't know why there's this disconnect for me. I try.
Well, it works for you. Right?
It's more of a feeling. It's more of a feeling than which music does too. But there's this weird separation for me, and I don't know why. I wish that I know that people probably want to give a different answer, but this is the truth.
That's great, because
it's kind of weird. I've always thought it was strange.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm weird. I am weird.
It's perfectly weird, because the stuff that you're coming out with is like, it's working. Maybe having stuff cross over like muddies what you're trying to actually do, and maybe that's why it's so clear and distinct with messages that you're trying to get across. Like, I haven't listened to any of your music, but I'm sure that it gets its feeling across, gets its point across, and you do the same thing with your comics, and that's great. So, hey, thanks for that. I guess I gotta
thanks, man.
I hope I'm getting the point across whatever's going on in my head.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jerome.
No problem.
Now, one thing, since we've been talking about here on the show, is a little bit about, taking our comics beyond the written page. And so with your book, Lost Angels. That's what I said, Los Angeles. It's Spanish.
It's all good.
I'm just kidding. Sorry about that. So Los Angeles, sorry, man. That book has been picked up and is being developed into a show. Correct. What was the process in order to, pitch that, present that? What did you have to do to build your deck? Did you have a deck? Did you have any type of promotion, like materials like that? So like, what was that presentation process like?
So get out your notebook. I took a couple of copies of the book. I brought it to some comic shop or another around town, and a producer walked in and saw it and read it and liked it and developed it, and now here we are.
Dang,
I didn't do shit.
I guess that's kind of like how these things work out in LA. It's like, yeah. Like,
there's serendipity. I'm gonna have to sacrifice a goat to that goddess. I swear to God, my entire life is like all about just chance and luck and inspiration.
Chris, can you touch the screen for a second?
Touch the screen?
Yeah, touch the screen. Okay, yeah. Stole it. Thanks.
So you say that's the way it's been working for you for all these times? Like, it's just been these serendipitous moments? You just serendip your toe into the pool of luck, and it's kind of like... I
follow what feels right for me, and it works out most of the time. And I'm always afraid that it's not going to work out, and there's been plenty of times when I haven't pulled the trigger on things. I call it jumping off the cliff. I'm just, you can't see if there's rocks down there. And a lot of times I'm just too chicken shit to do it. But I tell you what, it almost always pays off when you do it.
Yeah.
Just you just got to do it. And like I said, I just put these things out, and then look what happened. Things happen. It's not just me. I'm sure it's for everybody. And it doesn't mean the same thing is going to happen to you, but something, positive will happen out of your creations if you just put them out there in the world.
Yeah, I agree, man. And that's part of the thing of like, if you're like, dang, I made this webtoon and no one's reading it, or I make these YouTube pages and I'm only getting 10 views or something like that. It's like, you can't get more if you're only going to do a couple. You just got to keep creating and keep creating and keep creating, and that's when things start happening.
you got to look at it another way. Maybe the perspective, the perspective is skewed, because if you're doing your webtoon and nobody's looking at it, what's happening is you're making all the mistakes that you need to make right now, so that when you go on to the next thing, you don't make those anymore, you know, and you do another one and you do another one, and then pretty soon you do the next thing. You just keep going. You do the next thing, and all of a sudden everybody says, you've been doing it for 10 years, and everybody says, look at this person who's, you know, this new up and coming creator that's seemingly already formed out of nowhere.
I've only been trying for 20 years, but my fresh-faced outlook has... So, in this development process, like, are you working more towards, like, you know, here's the... you know, character designs, or here's this? Are you continuing work with the production as it moves along?
No, I'm completely hands off.
Gotcha.
And until they ask me to come on board, which I'm assuming they will at some point. But it's funny because now with this happening, you know, now I have a lawyer, and now I have an agent, and now I have like all this stuff. And with Dave and I, there's like, you know, what else do you guys have that we can possibly develop into something else? And that's great. We are developing things that could possibly be turned into something else. That's the nature of Dave's writing, because David sort of, everything he writes, Los Angeles is a sci-fi story about aliens that crash land in Santa Monica. But what really the story is about is about immigrant culture, you know? And so it's not always what it appears to be on the surface. And so David writes like that all the time, and he's brilliant. I got so lucky to meet him and work with him. And so we are developing things, but the thing is when we're developing these things as comics, they're comics first. We're not developing these things with an eye towards Hollywood. It just so happens that there's people that that now have our backs that will steer these things into the face of the right person to possibly develop them later, and then it'll become something else.
Right.
But it's comics first.
And that's like something that Rose said earlier, was that's like your audience can tell if you're not being genuine with your writing, or if you're writing like
your
to be
audience
picked
is not
up.
stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
Tom in the comments said that he's written as a journalist about animation and the movie business enough to know that it's part luck and part talent that lands these things in other media. Like, so, you know, if you just have luck, it's not gonna really pick up. But when you're like, you luck into something, and then that person's like, yo, I can see the talent in this guy, it's like, that's huge.
Yeah, it's luck. There's a little talent in there.
Yeah. And then Gabby says the movie business is a lot about that nepotiz, but you didn't have that, and you made it out with just your talent.
Yeah, there's a million different ways to do it.
Yeah.
But if that's your goal, I don't know. I don't got any advice for you.
Great, because the next question was, what advice do you have for up and coming people? Do you have any advice for up and coming people who are looking to perhaps, you know, pitch their book to someone, or to try to prep their story to be something else?
Don't
just let it kind of happen.
Well, if that's someone, what you're trying to do, I don't know.
That's already
I don't know. It's kind of gross, but at the same time, if that's what you're doing, I don't know. I don't know how to answer.
Well, you need to have a quality thing in your field, like in the field of comics, enough for it to be even ready for any type of transmogrification or whatever you call it, to move from one thing to another, you know. So
you got to stand out though too. That's the thing, is I think that you have to think about and market your things differently than everything else that you see on the shelf, because it's already been done and it's already, you know, everybody's already seen it. There's a lot of different ways. Like I'm working on a couple of pitches where like one is it's a story, it's a horror story that involves a podcaster, and then the idea is that we'll also have a podcast to kind of go along with that at the same time. So we're going cross media, but it doesn't take away from the comic as it is, and it doesn't take away from the podcast as it is, and they can both stand on their own, but they also cross market each other. And so it develops, you know, and hopefully into this, you know, people's consciousness more, you know, people will think about it more. And then I have another idea that's a completely silent comic about because I'm really into like pre-war blues, like from the 20s and 30s. Oh, nice. I just love that music. And, you know, like Robert Johnson, Sold His Soul to the Devil, blah, 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 all that stuff. Well, what if, you know, what if there's a record by somebody else out there that is cursed, and if you listen to it, you might die. But, you know, it also has this silent tale of it, but there's a record in the back. So it's like, I can sell it at record stores and I can sell it at comic shops. And anybody can look at it. They don't even have to know how to read. You know?
That's awesome, man. I love that fusion of comics and music. You hooked me on that one.
Yeah, I'm writing it right now. We'll see.
You are, dude. I'm psyched. Let's check in what Ben said. He said he worked on a project that was supposed to be a movie and other things, but they wanted it turned into a comic. It was an okay experience. That. Yeah, like where someone is like, I'm making a movie right now, but can you do the comic version or something like that?
Yeah, and you know, as a full-time comic book artist that does storyboards and things like that, people are going to come to me with projects like that. And if, you know, I got to pay the rent that month, I'm not going to say no to some director or producer and their script coming to me saying, and I'll throw them a number. I'll throw them a number, and if they can't hit the number, and I'll do, you know, like 8 pages, and they can try to get it themselves at a publisher. I'm not gonna, you know, use my shots at pitching to publishers. They can figure it out themselves.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like you do your end. And Ben said, even though like it still hasn't even seen the light of day. And then I guess that's part of the peril too. Perhaps you do it with a movie, and then the movie gets, you know, optioned, but then never developed, and then they can't release the comic because now this production company owns the rights or some junk like that or something. So then it's like, okay, so let's move over to Sam here. He's got another question. Let's see what Sam's got to say.
Muting myself. I'm unmuting myself.
All right.
Taking the steering wheel away from you, Eli.
Ah, no.
Taking agency of my own destiny.
Perfect.
No, it's just in the on the conversation about making it. You know, one of the things that, you know, came to light with all the events in my life recently was, you know, the making it is a lot of luck. And one of the things by continually creating, you just think of like each next thing is like buying another lottery ticket. You know, some people, they're going to buy one lottery ticket, they're going to hit the jackpot. Other people, I'm going to buy 10, 15 lottery tickets. But as long as I'm still playing, I'm still entering that lottery. It's going to hit someday. And hopefully it will before I run out of food and starve to death.
Yeah. It's a real, that's a real thing.
Yeah. You know, because, you know, right now I'm, you know, one of my side things is redoing my father's books of illustrations. And he's a brilliant artist. He was a brilliant artist, but he never found an audience. He had a couple of murals that were up in museums and things like that, but never found an audience. We would have never eaten if we were living off his art. And I mean, some of you have seen, you know, what I put up on Instagram. Really brilliant artist, but he never went into that hustle. He never entered the lottery. So you know, it's just all sitting there waiting for me to put it out now.
Because he wasn't crazy.
Oh, he was crazy.
In a different way. It's nuts to try to make your living off of art.
Yeah.
But it can be done.
Yeah, that's why I got my degree in engineering. But
that's why I taught.
But no, I totally get it. And, now I'm out there and just trying to, put stuff out there, try and stay in front of people. Hopefully, eventually I'll hit another jackpot.
Yeah, it will happen. I mean, it'll happen.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep dropping your name, Chris, everywhere I go. Oh yeah, Chris loves this. This is totally, just ask him.
Well, I do have impeccable taste.
All right, we got one more question here in the comments, and then we've got about 10 minutes here left. Let's see. Kevin Delgado asks, "Do you have to be out in LA to do storyboards? Is there an application process? Like, how do you get into the storyboards game?"
Well, how do you get into the storyboards game? It does help, I think, to be in LA or Atlanta. Atlanta is another big hub for film. It does help. It certainly does. The thing that helps for me is that when I was teaching, for all those years, I would have parents that came in that were directors and producers and things like that, and knew that I was an artist, and they would ask me if I did storyboards every now and then, and I would be like, yeah, sure. I had no idea what I was doing. My first storyboards I did with a pencil, and a piece of paper, and it was a nightmare. Don't do that. I mean, unless you're really good right off the bat. But it does help. But what I did is I didn't at the end of the day, I don't think that you really need to be here, because what I did is I went and I Googled production companies in Los Angeles, and I had a website where I made some fake storyboards and some that I actually did for real. And I just cold emailed every single production company in town or that popped up on Google, like 150 of them, and 10 of them got back to me. And I've worked with 6 of them. But because of that, then they go on to they come back to me and they say, my friend's a producer and you did really great work. We just love working with you, and we want they want you to work on such and such a show, and then it snowballs from there. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight,
Yeah. None of this creative work happens overnight. None of it's like a miracle snap. It happens. It's just about putting in the time, getting those reps in, just like anything else.
And the second you get complacent, you're dead.
Exactly. And even if you have that first experience where you experience a little bit of success, you can never get too comfortable, because each next step you got to keep going. I know, all of us recognize that when we're working on anything, if it's our day job or if it's our passion project, it's like, you got to keep striving. Though sometimes that day job, you're just like, F you, I'm not going to strive for you, but
you gotta keep them happy, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, where can we find you? What's all your links and all that? Where can we get your books?
So my website, you can go to chrisandersoncomics.com. There you can get, where is it? Here, these are my one-shot horror stories that I'm doing with David Acampo. They're like 12-page stories for like $5 each. And also Lost Angels right here. It's like a 150-page graphic novel. It's like 5 issues collected. And I have a Patreon. Oh, you can also get the Masters of the Universe sketchbook. I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Chris Anderson Comics, just like my website. And if you join that, I'll send you this Not Moss Man comic along with the sketchbook. The Creepshow book, they made 1,000 of them. Heavy Metal is on the stands right now. I'm in 297, 303, 305, and 306. I also have a lot of original artwork for sale on my website, and on Instagram, I'm at Chris Anderson Comics. see there's a trend there, but I'm about to throw it off because Twitter is at Chris A Comics. Yeah, that's where you can find me on the web. I have other projects coming up too, so
you can't talk about just yet.
I can talk about some of them. I'm doing a book that's coming out. We're going to kickstart it. Mark Sable, the author, the writer, and I are going to kickstart this book. It's called Chaotic Neutral. It is the idea is that it's the Dungeons and Dragons that your grandmother thought that you were playing. Mark's a huge D&D guy. I play with him every Wednesday. He's pretty great, but he writes modules too. And so the book also comes with will be coming with a module so you can play the book.
Oh, that's great.
So we're getting ready to kickstart that probably in the next month or two. So you can keep your eye out for that. I'm doing a story with Rocco Jerome. Many of you know, it's going to probably be in Wizard 2. And then also in another book that he's doing where he's collecting a bunch of these stories of these agents. What else have I got here? I wrote things down so I wouldn't forget because I always do.
A short story in the upcoming Babe Lord comic about
the
alien musician.
Yeah. And let's see. Yeah, that's about it right now that I can talk about.
Awesome. It's just been a real honor to have both of you people here, Ro and Chris. It's been amazing. Let's take a quick photo for YouTube, my YouTube thing. So smile big and get ready.
Gang signs.
Yeah, gang signs if you want. Sweet. Okay, that's perfect. I'm glad that I asked that this time because now everyone can be smiling and stuff and I don't have to cut it up like I had to a few weeks ago. It's been real amazing to have everyone here. Super inspiring to chat with Ro and Chris, two creators who we're all going to continue to follow and whose comic work is amazing. And once we see Ro's manga and Ro's anime and all that stuff and Chris's series and all the comics come together, we'll be like, I knew them when we were all on our way up, on our way to the top.
Hope so.
Yeah, you know, sometimes when what's that song by the same dudes you meet on your way up, you might meet up on your way down. So it's good to be nice to everyone all the time. And thank you all for being here and for being a creative crew. Thank you to Craig, Rick, and Ray, my co-host, and we'll see you guys next month. Anything else y'all want to say? Any other words of encouragement?
Make more comics.
Keep on hustling.
Yeah, exactly. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great rest of your weekend. Peace, guys.
Bye. Woo.